Good morning. It is Monday, April 10th, 2023. The House and the Senate are still on recess, and this is DC Signal to Noise. Since we last spoke, President Biden vetoed efforts to halt the WOTUS final rule. West Coast dock workers went on strike, then went back to work again. We celebrated Easter, and John Ram won the Masters Golf Tournament. Welcome to you all. I'm glad that you're with us. I'm AgriTalk host Chip Flory, Jim Wiesemeyer, Pro Farmer Policy Analyst. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. You can see I got some sun on my deck over the weekend.
Attaboy. Attaboy. living the good life out there, huh?
Well, sitting down will get you
Yeah.
tan.
That's right. I hope you had a good Easter weekend,
I
Jim.
did. Quiet
Good.
with family. Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Melody's already in there. Good morning, Melody. Let's go ahead and remind everyone that if you would like to participate in the conversation here this morning, you can do so just by finding the comments tab on your screen. Click on that, type in your question, type in your comment, and Jim will try to react to whatever you would like him to react to here this morning. Jim, let's start with some news from last week. And I think I want to start with what we started with on Friday on the AgriTalk Free-for-All, and that is the House Ag Committee requesting some additional funding for the Farm Bill. What's the status of this?
Well, and it's also the Senate Ag Committee.
The Senate Ag Committee is what I meant to say.
House Ag Committee acted first with their so-called budget and estimates letter, Chip, and then the Senate got into their act last week, asking the Budget Committee chairman, in essence, for a reserve fund as they try to get some of the billions of dollars. I think they said over $90 billion have been paid out in ad hoc disaster payments over the past few years. And there's a consensus on that, Chip. And you're not going to have a worthwhile farm bill unless they get some additional funding moved into various sections, including Title I and crop insurance.
Jim, this is a conversation we have every time the Farm Bill comes up. We need more money so that we can get away from the ad hoc disaster payments. And they come back and happen again because, as we discussed on Friday, a disaster is an opportunity for lawmakers to get closer to those being affected.
Yeah, then they might just keep it like that, Chip. But then you got a pseudo permanent ag disaster program without saying you have one. And of course, we know that it takes time for those disaster payments to be made when they're critically needed. And that's why doing it in a farm program is more expedient, more efficient. They'd probably spend less money overall, but I think I hear you. Lawmakers like to keep their fingers in that disaster pie.
Exactly. And, if it's in the Farm Bill, the triggers that will trigger a payment in any kind of a disaster are going to be documented. It's going to be laid out. We're going to have full understanding of what that is. So producers can keep track of what they need to prove that they are eligible for some of the payments. What a difference that would be compared to phase 2 of the ERP that's going on right now. Man, it's crazy.
Yeah, you want to know how not to run a farm program? It's phase 2 of ERP.
Yeah.
But there was a legitimate debate last week, Chip, at the AEI, American Enterprise Institute, where there was some concern expressed that depending on how you would move any additional funding into crop insurance, you want to keep that program actuarially sound. And so there was a few speakers who said, keep this separate, keep crop insurance actuarially sound and come up with a better way for this, disaster payments.
Okay. All right. In other news from last week, the U.S. economy created 236,000 new jobs in March. That was the fewest since December of 2020, but it was still in line with expectations.
Yeah, it seems that the traders now clearly think that May 2nd and 3rd is the next Federal Open Market
Mhm.
Committee meeting hearing, FOMC. And on the 3rd, the vast majority think that the Fed will bump up probably for the last time interest rates by 25 basis points. And then that's it. And then if that's the case, Chip, then the debate is how long will it remain in that position on hold before the first eventual cut?
Yeah. We've learned this a couple of times already this year. Don't settle. Don't settle on what the Fed action is going to be too soon, because just ahead of the last decision, we had the banks collapse. Silicon Valley Bank leading the way there on with its collapse, and it kind of changed everybody's attitude going into it. It, it it's April. It's April 10th. I get it, but there's still a lot of time between now and the 1st of May where something could happen to change attitudes.
Absolutely. We'll have a CPI report
Yeah.
Wednesday, producer price index report Thursday, and I guess those are the last two key reports
Yeah.
ahead of the May 2nd and 3rd. But in reading, I get a lot of economic letters, and the tone that I'm hearing, Chip, is the Fed's going to be cautious because history shows they have a habit of reversing too quickly, especially when you have real inflation. And we've seen inflation be quite sticky. So
Yeah.
they think that the Fed will hold pretty much longer than what the market's pricing in, and two, they could well lead us into a recession with continued
Yeah.
interest rate hikes.
The other thing that concerns me is I don't think we've seen the full surge in the Chinese economy since reopening, and I I think I would like to see the Fed stay on guard at least until we get that initial surge in the Chinese economy, because there's going to be ripple effects to that.
Yeah, what you're signaling is maybe inflation then.
Yeah.
Will
Yeah.
stick around. Yeah. Yeah. They're going to be sure now because the Fed, they'll never say they made a mistake, but they made a big mistake about a year ago when they
Yeah.
joined the White House, in particular, Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, and saying inflation was transitory. Now, once you make a mistake, you want to be on shore. We learned that as writers, that when you file an updated story to a correction, you better be extra careful. You
Right.
got the incorrect right,
Right.
correct in essence. So I think they're going to be very cautious. We have the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and World Bank officials meeting in town, their annual spring
Yep.
meetings. So you saw a host of interviews last week. You'll see Janet Yellen at the event this week, and they're going to put an update of the IMF report, Chip, but they signaled basically not many changes from their prior one. But they see a long slough here, Chip, as far as getting the U.S. economy, U.S. and world economy back on track. And
Hmm.
for agriculture, you need to see that world GDP for a true bull market at 4.5% or higher, and we're well under that
Yeah.
on the IMF. So that's the figure we've learned over the decades to watch, is that
Right.
world GDP number, and it shows a very anemic world growth.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned the White House, a couple of, well, maybe three or four issues from last week with the White House. The White House on Friday blamed the prior administration for the botched um, pullback from Afghanistan. I don't understand.
Yeah, they're losing some credibility on that, and even privately from some Democrats. You don't finger point that one, Chip. The question is not should we have left Afghanistan? It was the
How?
way,
Yeah.
and they're saying that they just followed Trump's game plan. That's just not correct. And so, when you try to
Even if they
rephrase.
did, even if they did follow Trump's game plan, it was their decision to follow Trump's game plan, which makes it
True,
their own.
true, true. And the thing was, no matter whose fault it was,
Right.
It gave signals to both China and Russia, and clear that was one of the
Iran.
reasons most foreign policy experts say helped give Putin the false bravado that he could
Yeah.
go into Ukraine February 24th last year.
Right. Right. Okay. Uh, President Biden, as expected, vetoed the congressional efforts to halt the waters of the U.S. final rule.
Yeah, the Senate sent him the bill. The House had already passed it, Chip. And some Republicans are saying there's going to be an override attempt, but I just don't see it. I just they do not have the vote.
No.
So that means that, but the veto is important, Chip, because it sends a clear signal in this murky DC arena that he wants changes in the WOTUS rule. That was the signal that we got from the White House. Now, a lot of
Yeah.
others will disagree with that approach, especially ahead of the Supreme Court ruling coming up here whenever, no later than June or July at the absolute latest. So, hopefully, once we get that, it'll be a much better clarification of the definition of waters of the U.S. because
Yeah.
that topic has lingered.
Oh, lingered. I think it's become resistant
Yeah.
to resolution.
Yes, it shows you even the initial Supreme Court ruling on it was murky, and it shows you unless you have clear lines of demarcation in a definition, you're going to have continued challenges. So hopefully we'll have that.
Yeah, WOTUS has become like water hemp.
Yes.
Resistant to,
Yes.
it's resistant to just about anything to finish it. Um, Jim, I know that this is something that according to the White House, I shouldn't be worried about this. You, on the other hand, I'm sure are worried about this because the IRS has released its strategic operating plan for spending $80 billion. They say that they're not coming after anybody that makes, or any household that makes less than 400,000. I'm okay. How are you prepping for this?
I wish I would have such problems. I would say, bring it on, bring it on. Then hire a lawyer for 200,000 to get rid of
Yes.
That's God bless America. Actually, this report, after reading it, most of it, not all of it, and observing what others are saying, it lacked a lot of clarity itself, Chip. They're not really specifying a lot how they're gonna unfold that huge amounts of money, and the IRS is worried that the Republicans are going to shortchange them in their annual appropriations because they couldn't get back at that $80 billion. So, but you can in the around whatever the amount is, around 20 billion, I guess, each year for the IRS. So that's something to watch in the weeks and months ahead, Chip. But we don't really know all that much how they're going to pour it out, even though Yellen, as Treasury Secretary, said she would.
Okay. Let's go ahead and go to a question that first off, good morning, Mac. Glad to see you and glad that you're here. Melody made the comment, and we're going to have to, Jim, I think both you and I are going to have to dig in this a little bit more, but Melody is saying the Dutch farmers appear to have won their case, yet nothing is in the news about this. Their political party was very successful in the elections. I guess I just don't know what the status is on some of the programs, rules, and regulations that the farmers could declare full victory on it.
Yeah, I'd have to do research.
Well, okay, right. And then Gary comes in. We will, Melody. We'll take a look at it. And then Gary comes in. What are your thoughts on the Fed Now program rolling out in July, the electronic currency, Jim?
Well, number one, just the fact itself that it's out. Number two, is any approach, either digital currency or another currency, going to buck the dollar, if you will? That's going to take a long time, Chip. But I think they're going to be very tight strings on their digital dollar. But again, I want to see I want to see the facts and figures.
Yep. Yep. One last thing from that came out on Friday. Russia has threatened to bypass the Black Sea grain deal. Jim, what's the status there?
Oh, he keeps on signaling he wants total control of that
Yeah.
grain situation in Ukraine. It looks like he might get it, Chip. That's
Yeah.
up in the odds. I think you've indicated you thought this was the last extension, and
Yeah.
at least it's flowing. That at least the signals that we're getting are flowing that way. And he keeps on saying he wants the sanctions on fertilizer lifted, and it's just not that way. There's no sanctions on the
Right.
fertilizer, but now he's adding in the SWIFT program that
Yep.
that we got him out of. So he's changing the goalposts. That's clear. Classic
Yeah.
Putin.
Classic. Very much. Okay. Over the weekend, as I mentioned in the lead, West Coast workers went on strike and then went back to work.
Again, the signal there was we still have a contract to negotiate, and they showed the unions. They showed that they had the power with the workers. They had a work stoppage, if you would. It wasn't announced that way, but there just weren't enough workers Thursday and
Right.
Friday, and then over the week of Sunday, actually. They're back at work today, but it was a clear signal that they need the talks to progress in a better way, according to the union people. So,
Okay.
and that's important ports for this China, India, Indo. Pacific trade, Chip. Even though more and more exports are going to alternative ports, LA and the other ports are very very important for the business of ag out there.
Right. As long as we're talking ports, some ports in Maine and in Delaware have been much more active than they have been in a long time importing crude oil.
Yes, very much so. It shows you that the trade flows are shifting. That's as a result of, I think, this new world, you can call it order or disorder. And we're at the beginning phase, not at the end, of a major realignment of trade flows in
Yeah.
a host of products, including agriculture.
Right. Right. Uh, I had this on my list, and Gary's got it too. He wants to know your thoughts on French President Macron's visit to China.
Well, I think he wants to make France separate from the U.S. I don't think he buys all into, I know he doesn't, the U.S. approach. And I think he wants to keep China. He doesn't want to see a continued moving away from China. And that's where we're at in the world right now, Chip. The U.S. is wanting to de-link, but you have countries such as France, Germany behind the scenes saying, no, that's a little bit too strong. So again, we haven't seen the end of this issue, but it was a clear signal that Xi gave the world when he put on a state's dinner. He traveled with the French
Yep.
president in China, so that's a big honor there. So that tells you how Xi is trying to do the rapport, the nice guy Xi angle. So
Yep.
so this is a very important decision. And but it shows you the importance of the lockhold that China has on many areas of the world.
Oh, yeah, and the loop is getting bigger.
Yes.
That are included in the list of national leaders that want to get in front of President Xi and have a conversation.
Yes. And China in the world, they want, I forget the exact date, it could be 2035, I think, that they want to truly be a military might. I mean, they're building.
Mhm.
And if you look at the history of what they're doing, they're checking them off here. And our US defense officials have acknowledged that. Meanwhile, we're falling behind in
Yeah.
the defense areas, Chip. So it you can get a little somber when you look at the defense of the world, but we've usually seen the proper time to turn it around and keep investing in our protection, which is, I
Yeah.
think, a president's number one duty.
Right. Right. Let's stay with China. They uh, playing some war games. They're simulating precision attacks on Taiwan.
And numbers are important. You haven't seen that many numbers there. So yeah, they're bellowing about the various U.S. House trade delegation is over there in Taiwan. So yeah, it's rankled them, no doubt about it.
Okay. Uh, I, I'll just bring this one up, and it's something that I learned over the weekend, and I learned it from you. Tesla plans to open a new mega factory to manufacture batteries in Shanghai.
Yeah, who do they think
Are
they are? France?
right? Are they going to qualify for the credits, the EV credits in the U.S. if they
I
do
don't.
this?
I don't think he cares. He'll do whatever he takes to sell. You know. But you have a number of over the week. I love to look at cars, whether
Hmm.
it's traditional cars or EVs. The Chevy Bolt is really selling good right now, Chip, because you can get a price under with their various promotions and the $7,500 credit, which they still have on that, as low as $17,000, by the way.
Yeah.
I saw that. Now, it's not the car I would want, but increasingly so, this is going to happen with technology, better batteries, etc. Now, the EPA on Wednesday is expected to roll out strict emission rules for certain of the auto sectors and light trucks. And when you read the backgrounders on that, this is part of their plan to help make EVs the number one choice in the U.S. for an auto purchase in the years ahead. So then you got the tie of regulations coming in to help you out.
Yeah. I, okay. Look at the timetable on this, if you would, because they're going to be rolling out the performance-based standards with model years 2027 through 2032. I thought we were going to be done with internal combustion engines by then, Jim.
Well,
Evidently not.
no, no, no. They know that these things are going to be around for a while, which means that when I'm looking for a new car between now and the end of the year, I'll have a different car. And I keep vacillating because, like you said, the good old diesel, the good old regular fossil fueled car and SUV is going to be with us. So, I may stay with it one more time
All
after
right.
all,
All right. All right. Other things that let's go to what's happening in the week ahead. Boy,
Well,
yeah,
I want to talk about what Gary has mentioned, astutely so, Rasmussen Jr. Jim, the somberness in your voice has changed dramatically in the past few weeks, and I don't think it's different than most Americans. You're right, Gary. I'm when I prepare for my speeches, the next campaign, as I call it, I try to change it up. But this is my first one for this installment. And, I looked lay of the land, lay of the world, and there is really some somber things going on. And again, I was brought up the glass half full is very good news because my father remembered when it was empty. So I'm still knowing that this country is still the best in the world. I kiss the tarmac every time I come back from an international trip. But I'm going through the same things that people at least of my generation are going through. The questions: are young kids more favorably inclined towards socialism than capitalism? That verdict is still out, by the way. Two is that I think the IMF and the World Bank is telling us we're going to have anemic growth for the next few years, and I think that they're right. Then I see that this town not being able to get an agreement on anything such as importance of the debt limit. So yeah, I just we need leadership at both ends. So let's hope it usually comes. But yeah, we've got some hurdles here.
okay, we do. And Jim, and I know that you've got some family relationships that you can probably relate to on this. Those that have embraced capitalism, and I'm looking at my kids, 30 and 27, and they are both very dedicated to working. Uh, uh, One of them is starting up a new business. They've got friends that are that lean the other way, closer to socialism. They're looking for help continuously. And they look at my kids and think, my gosh, how are they doing so well? You've got family that has embraced capitalism. And I'm sure that they've got friends that look at them and say, my gosh, how are they doing so well? It may come later to this generation than what it came to your generation and to my generation, but I think it's going to hit them at some point.
Absolutely. It's really the value of work, Chip. I mean,
Yep.
if I blame a lot of parents, to be our grandparents, but in this case, I think parents for a host of our issues, including the drug issue. Why are you fostering the purchase of these fentanyl drugs? Where did that psyche get into your children? That's one. Two is that when I was growing up, my parents installed the work ethic into where, number one, it kept you out of trouble. Number two, you learned, if you dealt with customers, business people, how to do monetary exchange, how to treat a customer. It was so many things you learned. And one of the more important ones, you started saving money so you could get the things you wanted rather than writing out a check, which I think happens too often with either parents or grandparents, and having their children or grandchildren get stuff. They don't know what it takes to buy something. And we're losing that, not lost it yet, but we're losing that in many different ways. And I think the society is suffering as a result.
Yeah, I suffer from some of the same feelings, Jim, believe me, but I don't think I'm as negative as what you might be on this right now. I think there's time. We'll see. Okay, week ahead. We learned something on Friday. The Republicans are going to hold a new Farm Bill confab at Iowa State University in Ames on Wednesday.
Yes, but interestingly so, it's not in any of the schedules, Chip.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting. I've got to call the Republican lawmakers' office and say, why aren't you putting out a release on this?
Right.
So I don't know whether it's been postponed or not, but it's something I got to check on today.
Okay. All right. Very good. This week, President Joe Biden is going to travel to Ireland, an international trip.
Yeah, the ag angle on that is some reports have surfaced that the UK is going to whisper again in his ear, we want a trade agreement.
Yep.
And so let's see if he answers positively this time, because countries are going around the world inking more traditional trade agreements, whether it's bilateral or multilateral, and we continue to be on the sidelines.
Right. Okay. Brazil President Lula will be traveling to China.
Yeah, remember his initial trip was postponed because he had congestion problems or something. And he's taken a slew of meatpacking companies over there with him. Brazil is definitely in the China camp, and their ag sector is going to grow for many different reasons, but that's one of them.
Right. Yeah, and there's going to be a focus on beef exports from Brazil into China in particular, right?
Absolutely.
All right. And we get supply and demand report on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, they're basically going to incorporate the grain stocks reports that we've already had. So really, the tide has turned to new crop U.S. corn and the weather and crop prospects in Brazil and Argentina. So I don't think it's so much on this report.
Right. Okay. You know what? There's one that I've been forgetting to ask you. I even forgot to ask you on Friday, Jim. What did you learn from the students from Texas that made the trip to Washington?
Oh, well, if you want to get a good smile on my face, just talk to students at Texas A&M. They're just really moored quite well. I don't know what it is about Texas A&M students. They're on the cutting edge of so many questions, and these were honor students, the types of questions they ask. We were visited in the restaurant, a nice visit by former House Ag Committee Chairman Colin Peterson. We had other people there. David Wasserman of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter was there. The types of questions those students asked, Chip, are similar to some of the smartest questions I get from veteran farmers and ranchers during my speeches, and that's the positive side. That
There
at
you
least in
go.
Texas A&M, they're teaching their students really, really good.
Excellent. Excellent. Anything else? We're out of time.
No, I go down to Southern Virginia to speak and attend a Virginia cattlemen's meeting, and I'll be, Wasserman will be there too. So you'll probably see an election update from me from David later this week.
Outstanding. Outstanding. All right. This morning on Agri Talk, we got Machinery Pete and Scott Hayes, the president of the National Pork Producers Council. This afternoon, Dan Huber from the Huber Report. Have a great week, everybody. Keep watching for those signals.